Wagwan family. Mic check 1, 2. Make sure everything's sounding crisp and clean. Give me a 1 in the chat if you can hear me clearly. 1 in the chat if you can hear me clearly. You know what I mean? Let's run it.
Bittersweet Herbals, where the taste is bitter, but the results are sweet. Bittersweetherbals.com.
Run the rhythm.
Bittersweet Herbals, where the taste is bitter, but the results are sweet. Bittersweetherbals.com.
Yes, family, make sure to get your bitters. Your boy Silah Shalom is in the building. Peace, love, and light. Create a gang. Salute to everyone chiming in. I see you, Devil Cosmon. Peace to the righteous God. I see you, Iman Keon. Where's that Trini? I see you there. You know what I mean? Salute to Devil Cosmon. He got a presentation coming up soon. Going in. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to give up too much, but you know, when the brother comes on, he goes in hard. I think it may be presented on Cosmon Cal channel, if I'm not mistaken. You know what I mean? Salute to the righteous God. Forever exposing false gods. You know what I mean? We're the false gods killers. That's what we do over here. We slay off the false god. One of the artists of Yahweh says, Shalom, Shalom Aleichem. Shalom, Shalom. Who else we have in the chat? Thomas, where's it, Thomas? Where's it, Thomas? Yes, family. What we have? So you see the topic, man. I just a little quick side, nothing major. Touching on the Arameans and the Aramaic script. You know what I mean? Because I notice a lot of times, you know, we overlook Aramaic. You know what I'm saying? We always talk about the Hebrew and the Hebrew this, the Hebrew. But, you know, Aramaic was definitely an influential dialect in the Levant, the so-called Middle East, and even the Far East. You know what I mean? As far as Mongolia, the influence is found. So, you know what I mean? Let me run the rhythm real low real quick. Run the rhythm low. You know how we dizzle. Run the volume low while we are chat about. Run the rhythm low while we are chat about. Okay, you can hear me clearly. All right, no doubt, no doubt. I see the ones. Yes, I. So you know me, I have to start off my day with my little spliff stuff. You know what I mean? So again, the Arameans and the Aramaic script. Now, you know, Aram comes from the Bible. Let's get a little bit of research on Aram real quick. Let me see. It's a blood clot vibes. Where said Bishop X? Lodge up yourself, yeah? Lodge up yourself, Bishop. So we're talking about Aram. You know what I mean? The Arameans and the Aramaic script, right? But what we hear about Aram is in the Bible, son of Shem. It says Aram is a son of Shem according to the Table of Nations in Genesis, chapter 10 of the Hebrew Bible, and the father of Uz, Hul, Gether, and Meshach. The book of Chronicles lists Aram, Uz as descendants of Shem, although without stating explicitly that Aram is the father of either of the four. So, long story short, Aram represents the son of Shem. As you know, as the Owaspi followers, you know that Shem was not a person. So that means more likely Aram was not a person. Unless Aram was from the fleet of Shem, coming from that district. But we still know that's false because the time period of Aram doesn't go back to 25,000 years ago. You know what I mean? This time period that they're playing with is dealing with the time period that the false gods gave you. The Jewish calendar gives you a starting point at 3761 BC. So everything will be from that point coming downward, dealing with Aram, the Arameans, and the Aramaic. Now, in the Hebrew, I'm reading right here. In the Hebrew Bible, Aram is usually regarded as being the eponymous ancestor of the Armenian people of ancient Syria. Need citation. On the contrary, Australians, Chinese Revolutionary, and South China Morning Post co-founder Sang Tai claimed that Aram's son Uz, Hul, Gether, and Meshach are the ancestors of the indigenous people of the Americas, Austro-Asiatic peoples, Austro-Asians, and the indigenous people of Siberia, respectively, while also assigning the Armenians to Aram. That's interesting. But it ain't too far-fetched, because when you look at Syria on the map and you look at the influence of Aram and the Armenians and their reach, they did reach into Asia. They did migrate there, so there could be definitely some descendancy of the Armenians in Asia. That's not too far-fetched to believe. And then we're going to show you some influence. Now let's jump into it real quick. Let's jump into it. This is the Armenians and the Armenian script. Now what you're looking at here is the Aramaic script. The Armenians and the Aramaic script. And if you notice, basically, the Aramaic script stems from, of course, the Phoenician or the Paleo. It's just a different dialect and branch of the language. So if you notice, you have the Aleph, the Bet, the Gamel, the Daleth, the Hey, the Wa, the Zen, the Yeh, the Heth. And you can see the similarities with the Hebrew. And this Hebrew, what you're seeing is the square, the modern Hebrew. That's not the Paleo. The Aramaic carries more of the Paleo script than the Talmudic Babylonian script. Because the square script that you see right here on the screen, the Aleph, you see the Aleph in that square, that's after the captivity. That's post-captivity script, the Babylonian Hebrew script. That's what that is. Scroll down. Again, we see that the Aramaic script looks very closely in resemblance to Phoenician, which in return it really is. Now look, historically and originally, Aramaic was the language of the Armenians, a Semitic or Shemitic speaking people of the region between the northern Levant and the northern Tigris Valley. By around 1000 BC or 10th century BC, the Armenians had a string of kingdoms in what is now part of Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, and the fringes of southern Mesopotamia. So look at that. So they're already flourishing around 10,000 BC. Now, around this time period, Israel, this would be around the time of, let's say, roughly the ending of the time of the Judges, about to start the time of, what's the name, David. This is roughly around the time of David, a little before David, that the Armenians are thriving in the region. Now look, Aramaic is thought to have first appeared among the Armenians about the late 11th century BCE. By the 8th century BCE, it had become accepted by the Assyrians as a second language. So here we have Assyrian influence, you know what I mean? Or the Aramaic has influence on the Assyrians around the 8th century BCE. So what I've noticed when I was doing the research, the furthest the Aramaic language goes back is around to the 10th, 11th century BC. You know what I'm saying, around that time. The mass deportation of people by the Assyrians and the use of Aramaic as a lingua franca by Babylonian merchants served to spread the language, so that in the 7th, 6th century BCE, it gradually supplanted Akkadian, which is cuneiform, as the lingua franca of the Middle East. Now look at the time period, 8th century BCE. This is when the Assyrians take on the Aramaic language. And then keep in mind, Israel goes into captivity 722 BCE. So when they adopt what they say in Daniel chapter 1:4, they adopted the Assyrian, or they adopted the Chaldean tongue, it would have been the Aramaic tongue. It would have been the Aramaic tongue that the Hebrews would have adopted in Babylonia. But in Babylonia, they adopted the Aramaic tongue, and that Aramaic script later became known as the modern Hebrew script that you have today, stemming from Aramaic. The earliest undisputed historical attestation of Armenian people as a people appears much later in the inscription of Tiglath-Pileser I, 11th century BCE. Now this is pretty pretty contrast picture, but you can see this is the guy right here. What's his name? Tiglath, however you pronounce that. Tiglath, right here. You see him with his cap on. You see the garment. And if you look closely, you can see the Phoenician script. I mean, not the Phoenician. You can see the cuneiform symbols. See that? So this is 11th century BCE, but we see cuneiform script. Tiglath the first was a king of Assyria during the Middle Assyrian period, 11th century to the 10th century BC, Common Era, before Common Era. Now look, Aramaic rose to prominence under the Neo-Assyrian Empire, 9th century to the 6th century BC, under whose influence Aramaic became a prestigious language after being adopted as a lingua franca of the empire by Assyrian kings, and its use was spread throughout Mesopotamia, the Levant, and parts of Asia Minor. Arabian Peninsula and ancient Iran under Assyrian rule at its height. Aramaic was spoken in what is now Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, parts of southeast and south-central Turkey, northern part of Arabian Peninsula. So look at the influence that Aramaic had. But nobody really touched on how influential the Aramaic language was. And you see it rose to prominence in the new Assyrian Empire, starting from the 9th century to the 6th century BC. So that time period would have encapsulated Israel's captivity. So in Daniel 1:4, it said that the Hebrews had to learn the Chaldean tongue. Let me get it real quick. Let me get that real quick. Blue letter. Daniel 1:4. Let's get that real quick. What does it say in Daniel 1:4? Daniel chapter 1, verse 4. Let's get it. Look what it says. Daniel chapter 1, verse 4. Children in whom was no blemish, but well favored. This is referring to the Israelites in captivity. And skillful in all wisdom and cunning in knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach and learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. See that? So right here is telling you that Hebrews learned the tongue of the Chaldeans. What is the tongue of the Chaldeans at this particular time? Because this is captivity. Captivity took place the 5th century BCE, and we're talking 200, 300 years prior to that in the 9th century BCE. Right. So look what the date here for the Aramaic rose to prominence under the Neo-Assyrian Empire, 911 to 605 BC. So that will fit roughly this time period. This is a little before Daniel. But the language spoken in Babylonia and Mesopotamia is Aramaic. So Daniel would have learned the Chaldean tongue, which would have been Aramaic. Aramaic was spoken in what is now Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, parts of southeast and central Turkey, northern parts of the Arabian Peninsula, and parts of southwest Iran, as well as the southern Caucasus, basically the Caucasus, having gradually replaced several other related Semitic languages. So it's showing you how influential the Aramaic language was. It even reached southern Caucasus or Caucasian. Now look what it says. According to the Babylonian Talmud, Sanhedrin 38b, the language spoken by Adam, the Bible's first human, was Aramaic. They said Adam spoke Aramaic. So keep in mind, they gave you a starting point for Adam, for the calendar, 3761 BC. So that means Adam would have been speaking Aramaic 3761 BC. And we know that's off. In fact, get that chart. Let's get that chart. Let's get the chart. Let's put it on the time period. Let's put on the time period. Hold on. All right, let me see here. Hold up. All right. The time of Adam, right here. If Adam spoke Aramaic, here's Adam. We scroll down. You got 3761 BC. That would have been the birth of Adam. So Adam would have been speaking Aramaic 3761 BC. But Aramaic doesn't pop up on the scene until the 10th, 11th century BC. It's not even on this map. We don't even make this map. I ain't bringing that far down. So, of course, saying that to say that the timeline is off. And it's going according, look what it says, according to the Babylonian Talmud. When I did the European authorships of the Bible, I showed you when the Talmud came about. Let's pull that up. Let's pull that up real quick. European authorships of the Bible. And when the Talmud came about. Look at this. See, it's good that we got all these documents still documented with these presentations because we can just pull up time periods. Let's go to the Talmud. Watch this. What did I say? That's the Jerusalem Talmud. They go to Babylonian Talmud. Look at the date, though. Babylonian Talmud, 6th century to the 10th century, Common Era. What did it say right here? According to the Babylonian Talmud, the language spoken by Adam, the Bible's first human, was Aramaic. So according to the Talmud, which would have been produced in the 6th century Common Era, they talking about Adam in the 6th, 10th century Common Era. How they know that Adam spoke Aramaic in the 6th, 10th century when the Talmud was put together? When the Babylonian Talmud was put together, how did they know that Adam spoke Aramaic? Now look at this. Aramaic is also believed by most historians and scholars to have been the primary language spoken by Jesus of Nazareth, both for preaching and in everyday life. And it is documented that, he did speak Aramaic. Aramaic was the language of Jesus, Yeshua, who spoke the Galilean dialect during his public ministry, as well as the language of several sections of the Hebrew Bible, including parts of the book of Daniel and Ezra, and also the language of the Targum, the Aramaic translation of the Hebrew Bible. Look at that. It is also the language of the Jerusalem Talmud, Babylon Talmud, and the Zohar. Now, I just showed you the Babylonian Talmud. They go to Jerusalem Talmud up here. But look at the time period. This is the 4th century Common Era. This is Aramaic you're looking at. You thought it was Hebrew. This is Aramaic. See that? Look at that. What did it say? What did it say? The language of the Targum, the Aramaic translation of the Hebrew Bible, it is also the language of the Jerusalem Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud. It's Aramaic. That's what it is. This whole time we thinking it's Hebrew. It's Aramaic. That's what it is. Now the Targum, for those who don't know, the Targum is basically, that's just a translation of the Hebrew Tanakh into the Aramaic dialect. Now, if you look at the dialect closely, what do you see? What does that look like? This is the same as this right here. The Jerusalem Talmud is the same language. Look at it. Look how identical it is. Let's go down to the Jerusalem Talmud. Look how identical it is. You know why? It's the same goddamn thing. The Babylonian Talmud, and this is the Aramaic translation of the Tanakh. That's Aramaic right there. That ain't Hebrew. It's a dialect of Hebrew, but it's Aramaic. And not only that, this is a translation of the Hebrew Tanakh. The Hebrew Tanakh was compiled in 450 by the men of the Great Assembly under Ezra. So what does that tell you? Ezra and them boys would have been dealing with the Aramaic script. They were the proof and evidence. See that? So the Targum, let me read what a Targum is. Look, a Targum was an originally spoken translation of the Hebrew Bible, also called the Tanakh, which was compiled in 450 BC, that a professional translator would give in the common language of the listeners when that was not biblical Hebrew. Look what it say. This had become necessary near the end of the 1st century BC, as the common language was Aramaic, and Hebrew was used for little more than schooling and worship. Look at that. Hebrew wasn't even a main language in the 1st century BC. Aramaic was flourishing. This shit was on the verge of being, Hebrew was on the verge of being a dead language. Look what it said. Hebrew was used for little more than schooling and worship. That's it. But the everyday common use was the Aramaic script. Look what it say. In around 700 BC, Aramaic slowly started to replace Akkadian, which is cuneiform, in Assyria, Babylonia, and the Levant. Now check it. Widespread bilingualism among Assyrian nationals was already present prior to the fall of the empire. The language transition, now listen to this. The language transition was achievable because the two languages, meaning the cuneiform and the Aramaic, featured similarities in grammar, vocabulary, and because the 22-letter Aramaic alphabet was simpler to learn than the Akkadian cuneiform, which had over 600 signs. So they're showing you that cuneiform has similarity with vocabulary and grammar to the Aramaic, which in return, of course, is the Phoenician. Aramaic is thought to have first appeared among the Arameans about the 11th century, the late 11th century BC. By the 8th century BC, it had become accepted by the Assyrians as the second language. See that? So you have cuneiform script, and then you have now the Aramaic script in the 8th century BC. Now, this is before Israel goes into captivity. Remember, Israel goes into captivity 722 BCE. So prior to their coming, they adapt this Assyrian script in Assyria and Babylon. The mass deportation of people by the Assyrians and the use of Aramaic as a lingua franca by Babylonian merchants served to spread the language, so that in the 7th and 6th century BCE, it gradually supplanted Akkadian as the lingua franca of the Middle East. So by the time Israel goes into captivity, guess what? Aramaic is the dominant language, or the second spoken language. So in the book of Daniel, right here, in chapter Daniel 1:4, where it says, whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. They're teaching you the tongue of the Chaldeans. And they said there was two prominent languages, cuneiform, and the second language was Aramaic. So guess what? They would have been familiar with the Aramaic, being that they already spoke. They speaking already Hebrew, so that's just a different dialect. So they would have been aware of the Aramaic. The converging process that took place between Assyria, Akkadia, and Aramaic across all aspects of both languages and societies is known as the Aramaic-Assyrian symbiosis. See that? You got Aryan-Assyrian script. So Assyria, the Aramaic script migrated from Syria and found its way into Mesopotamia, or Assyria. Introduced as the official language of the Assyrian Empire by Tiglath-Pileser III, 745 to 727 BC, right here. Look at him, right? Now look at the date. Keep in mind, Israel went into captivity 722 BC. Talking like 5 years after that. Israel is on its way to captivity. It became the language of commerce and trade, the vernacular language of Assyria in the late Iron Age and classical antiquity, and the lingua franca of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, 911 to 605 BC, Neo-Babylon Empire, 605 to 539 BC. Both of these time periods, Israel would have been going into captivity. Hold on. Israel would have been going into captivity around that time. How do you pronounce that shit? Pronounce. I'll be stumbling on these words. Arameans, how you pronounce that shit? I'll be stumbling over these words. Achaemenid. See, I would have been stumbling on that shit all day. Achaemenid. Okay, the Achaemenid Empire. The Achaemenid Empire, 539, 323 BC. Now, this would have been the time at the ending of their empire. That's when Greek rose up. The Parthian Empire, 247 BC to 224 AD, and the Sassanian Empire, 224 to 651 AD. Following the Achaemenian conquest of Assyria under Darius I. Look, the Aramaic language was adopted as the vehicle for written communication between the different regions of the vast empire with its different people and languages. See that? Look how influential Aramaic is, and we don't even talk about the language of Aramaic like that. We dust it under the rug and Hebrew, but nah, Aramaic is dominating during this time under Darius, under the previous kings. After the conquest of Assyria by the Seleucids, basically the Greek Empire, in the late 4th century BC, Imperial Aramaic gradually lost its status as an imperial language, but continued to flourish alongside ancient Greek. Now, we already know that the Greek language stems from the Phoenician language. You know what I mean? And Aramaic is a dialect of that. The Greeks came on the scene after Homer's 7th century BC. So the Greeks could have literally learned the Aramaic dialect because the Aramaic dialect was flourishing during this time. It seemed like it was more flourishing than the Hebrew because the Phoenician and the Hebrew is not even brought up, the Paleo and all that. The Aramaic is dominating during this time. Look what it says, but continue to flourish alongside ancient Greek. Ancient Greek came on the scene 7th century BC. Anything coming on down the line dealing with language in Greek got to be dealing with the Aramaic script. Look what it says, the Assyrians and Babylonians who permanently replaced their Akkadian language and its cuneiform script with Aramaic and its script. See that? So now we have the Assyrians and the Babylonians replacing cuneiform using the Aramaic script. Right? Now look at this. Among the Jews, but not the Samaritans, who adopted the Aramaic language, there you have it, as their vernacular and started using, look, the Aramaic alphabet, which they called square script. Now, the square script Hebrew is what you have today, even for written Hebrew, displacing the former Paleo-Hebrew alphabet. The modern Hebrew alphabet derives from the Aramaic alphabet. See that? See that? That shit don't arise from, that shit arises from the Aramaic. In contrast to the modern Samaritan alphabet, which derives from the Paleo. So the Samaritans stuck with the Paleo, while what you call the Babylonians with Judah, Levi, and Benjamin, they would have been speaking this Aramaic script. But look what it says. The Babylonians, the key point here is that the Babylonians adopted the Aramaic script, and they call it the square script. This is the square script right here. This is the square script. In your Babylonian Talmud, when the Hebrew language, you see how it looked like blocks? It looked like blocks when you see the script. That's when that came into play. When the Babylonians adopted the Aramaic script, they adopted what they call a square script. They made it in blocks. Now look, square script. Ketiv, Ashar. Now that's the square script. Same thing. When you open up that Babylonian Talmud, that's what you're going to see. That's what you're going to see. That's Aramaic. That's Babylonian, Assyrian, Aramaic, known as the square script. Look what it says. Ketiva Ashar literally means Assyrian writing. See that? It says Assyrian writing. You don't say Hebrew writing. You don't say Phoenician or Canaanite language. This is Assyrian adopted writing. So he got the Assyrian writing, also known as the Ketiva Ashuret, is the traditional Hebrew language name of the Hebrew alphabet, used to write both Hebrew and Jewish Babylonian Aramaic. It is often referred to as square script. The names Ashar, Assyrian, or square script are used to distinguish it from the what? Paleo-Hebrew script. See that? This ain't the Paleo-Hebrew script. This is not the Paleo-Hebrew. The Paleo-Hebrew look like this. See how I know how the Paleo-Hebrew look. I know how the Paleo-Hebrew look. It's the Paleo-Hebrew right here. Bong. See that? That's the Paleo-Hebrew script. Look, we got the Paleo-Hebrew and you got the Aramaic. Look at that. It's all one and the same. It's different dialects. But look, the names Ashar, Assyrian, or square script are used to distinguish it from Paleo-Hebrew script. But look what they name it. Look at the name of this. It's called Ketiv Ashar. Ashar. But look who Ashar is, though. The god Ashar. What are you doing up there? You see the cuneiform script at the top? You see it right there. Ashar was the national god of the Assyrians in ancient times, and his name is Ashar. Ashar, and it's also spelled Asur. Asur. You know what I mean? If you ask me, this is the Osiris of Babylonia, of Assyria. Because you got Osiris of Egypt, and you got Osiris, or Asur, of Mesopotamia. And Osiris had influence of this region during his dominance. And then the Oaspi, when they wrote them tales of creation, it said they brought it to them according to their custom, their language, their dialect. So nonetheless, now we got the Carpentry Stela. It's the Carpentry Stela. Now look at this. Look at this stela. See that? What do you see at the bottom of that stela? See that? That's the Paleo-Hebrew. That's Aramaic, Phoenician. All one and the same nonetheless. But look what the script say. The Carpentry Stela was the first ancient inscription ever identified as Aramaic. So this is the first inscription identifying Aramaic right here. Take a look at that again. This is Aramaic. Carved in stone. The Carpentry Stela was the first ancient inscription ever identified as Aramaic. Although it was first published in 1704, it was not identified as Aramaic until 1821, when Ulrich Friedrich Kopp complained that previous scholars had left everything to the Phoenicians and nothing to the Arameans, as if they could not leave written at all. Kopp noted that some of the words of the Carpentry Stela corresponds to the Aramaic in the book of Daniel and in the book of Ruth. Look at that. Josephus and Strabo, the later citing Posidonius, both stated that the Syrians called themselves Arameans. The Septuagint, the earliest extant full copy of the Hebrew Bible, a Greek translation, used the terms Syria and Syrian, where the Masoretic text, the earliest extant Hebrew copy of the Bible, uses the term Armenian and Aramaic. Numerous later Bibles follow the Septuagint usage, including the King James Version. This connection between the name Syria and Aramaic was discussed in 1835 by Etena Mark Quatremere, however you pronounce that. So this guy right here is discussing these things in the mid-1800s. He discussing Aramaic language. That don't look like no Bantu Negro from the Congo having discussion about their ancient language. The European all on top of this. This don't look like no Bantu Negro from the Congo discussing and debating about the Aramaic script. Ancient Aram, bordering northern Israel and what is now called Syria, is considered the linguistic center for Aramaic, the language of the Armenians who settled the area during the Bronze Age, 3500 BC. See that? Remember the Talmud said, Adam spoke Aramaic, and that would have been 3761 BC, all within the confines of their false time story, their false time period. Armenians carried their language and writings into Mesopotamia. There you have it. There you have it. That could have took place during the captivity in 722 when Assyria invaded. When Assyria invaded Syria or the northern kingdom, brought them into captivity. So the Armenians or the Syrians or the northern kingdom would have brought in the Aramaic into Mesopotamia, 722 BC. You know what I mean? That's one way it would have got into Mesopotamia, but nonetheless, Armenians carried their language and writings into Mesopotamia by voluntarily migration, by forced exile of conquering armies, and by the nomadic Chaldean invasion of Babylonia during the period from 1200 to 1000 BC. In ancient Greek, Aramaic language was most commonly known as the Syrian language in relation to the native non-Greeks inhabitants of the historical region of Syria. Since the name of Syria itself emerged as a variant of Assyria, the biblical Ashar, the national god of that region, and the Akkadian Ashuru, a complex set of semantic phenomenons was created, becoming a subject of interest both among ancient writers and modern scholars. Now look at that. Kohen Greek word, Hebrews, has been translated as Aramaic. In some versions of the Christian New Testament, as Aramaic was at that time the language commonly spoken by the Jews. See that? Commonly spoken. Hebrew wasn't even the Phoenician Hebrew that they talking about. That was a dead language, a dying language. They said they only spoke that during schooling and worship. In biblical scholarship, the term Chaldea was for many years used as a synonym of Aramaic due to its use in the book of Daniel and subsequent interpretation by who? Jerome. You know who Jerome was, right? The necromancer. The necromancer playing with dead skeletons. The earliest Aramaic alphabet was based on the Phoenician alphabet. There you have it. That's the root of the Aramaic. So Aramaic is just a dialect of Phoenician. In time, Aramaic developed its own distinctive square style. See that? Square style. The ancient Israelites and other peoples of Canaan adopted this alphabet for writing their own language. See that? They adopted the Phoenician, right? Later becoming the Aramaic, square style. The square style, of course, is this. This is the square style. Right there, the blocks. Right here. So you got the Paleo-Hebrew. Let me see if they got a comparison of the Paleo and the modern. Let me just put in the Hebrew alphabet. See this style right here, the block style? This block style comes out of Babylonia. They gave you that. Your enemies, Israel, gave you this. What they call the block style. This is the block style. See that? That developed in Babylon. And it's Aramaic. See that? Again, the earliest Aramaic alphabet was based on the Phoenician alphabet. In time, Aramaic developed its distinctive square style. That happened in Babylon, as we just read. The Babylonians did that. And it says the ancient Israelites and other peoples of Canaan adopted the language, the alphabet, for writing their own language. The other main writing system used for Aramaic was developed by Christian communities, a cursive form known as the Syriac alphabet. See that? This is the Bar Rakib inscription. And when you look closely at this inscription, what you see? See it? See that Paleo, which is Aramaic, carved in stone. What does it say? 22 lines recounting the construction of the second palace between 732 and 727 BCE. Their Aramaic inscriptions are written in the Luwian style, raised characters, and represent some of the first known inscriptions to use Imperial Aramaic. Older inscriptions found at Samael were written in the Somalian language or the Phoenician language. So this is Aramaic right here, what you're seeing. If you look closely, that's Aramaic. See that? See the Armenian? See the Zarathustra symbol right here? This is Persians, my nigga. Oh, snap. All right. Now, again, what we see here, we see another inscription. You see that right here? That's Phoenician. That's Aramaic. See the sun disk? You see the crescent moon sitting on its belly? What does it say? Inscription that states, "My Lord is Baal Haran. I am Bar Rakab, son of Panamu. Panamu. My Lord is Baal." There you go, right there. These niggas is worshiping the god Baal. They're worshiping the false god Baal. But look at the script. The script is in what? Aramaic, Phoenician. That's the script. Carved in stone. Right there. There go the script right there. Look at this script. Look at this one. Look at that. This is Hebrew. This is what you considered Paleo-Phoenician, now classified as Aramaic. All different, same script, different dialects coming down the time period. But this is carved in stone. I thought Hebrew and all that. I thought the Phoenician didn't exist in stone. There you go, right there. All those later time periods. Look, incomplete fragment of 9 lines at the right. A bearded man holds a drinking vessel and a fan. Symbols of a deity appears. Symbols of a deity appears at the top. In the inscription, Bar Rakab declares his loyalty to Tiglath-Pileser, Lord of the 4 quarters of the earth, and expresses the favor shown to him by the god Rakab, El. Look at that. They got an L. Look at that. Lord of the 4 quarters of the earth. Didn't Israel get scattered into the 4 quarters of the earth? Who talking that 4 quarter talk? They are. This is interesting, but nonetheless, you see this script right there, carved in stone. Aramaic, Paleo, Phoenician. There's another stela. Same thing. Look at that. Someone said, oh, that's Paleo Hebrew. It's Aramaic, Phoenician. All one and the same, honestly. The Nereb stelas, a pair of 7th century BCE Aramaic inscriptions found in 1891 in Al-Narab near Aleppo, Syria. Look at this. This is a 7th century BCE inscription of Aramaic. Look at that. This is way before Christ. Jesus, Yeshua spoke Aramaic. This is damn near 600-700 years before Yeshua, and they go to Aramaic. And this is in Syria. This is the same time period Israel would have been going into captivity. So this is the language of the northern kingdom speaking Aramaic as they would have been going into captivity. Because look at the date. They gave us a date. See, that's what I said. We put everything on the timeline. 7th century BC. When did Israel go into captivity? 722 BC. And this is in Syria. So this would have been the northern kingdom, the Samaritans, speaking the Aramaic dialect as they would have went in captivity. And as going into captivity, the Assyrians adopted the Aramaic dialect, creating the square root modern Hebrew dialect from the Aramaic. Look at that. See that? So I'm showing you how, the Aramaics, it's rooted in Syria and migrated into Mesopotamia. Then it came back into Jerusalem, 4th century BC under Ezra. So the Babylonian Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, the Tanakh all would have been written in Assyrian Aramaic script, which would have been the square root. The square script. Oh, yeah. Look at this. The Kandahar bilingual rock inscription. Now look at this. This is an inscription with Greek and Aramaic. You got Greek at the top and you got Aramaic at the bottom. Almost like the Rosetta Stone. But look at the Aramaic. That's Aramaic script right there. Let's see. Look what it says. The Kandahar bilingual rock inscription, a Greek and Aramaic inscription by the Mauryan Emperor Ashoka at Kandahar, Afghanistan, 3rd century BCE. This is Afghanistan. This is, and it's the 3rd century BCE. Look at this. They got the Greek inscription. So the 3rd century BCE, guess who would have been ruling around this time? The Ptolemies, Alexander the Great. They would have been coming into power this time. So you have Greek and then you have Aramaic right there. This whole time we boasting about the Hebrew when it's Aramaic we should be focused on. Aramaic was the flourishing language from the 8th, 7th century BC all the way coming on down to Yeshua's time and before, and after. You got another inscription, the Aramaic inscription of Taxela. Look at that. It's Aramaic. You see it? See it? So the inscription is written in what? Aramaic, probably by the Indian Emperor Ashoka around 260 BCE. An Indian emperor is speaking Aramaic. You ain't know that. You ain't even know that Indians were speaking Aramaic to show you how influential Aramaic had become around the 2nd century, 3rd century BCE. So we got a nigga in India, but right here above it, here, it said Emperor Ashokan in Kandahar, Afghanistan. That's not too far from India. So you got Afghanistan. You see the Aramaic script as far as Afghanistan. You see the Aramaic script as far as India. Or being influenced by an Indian emperor, depending on how large his empire was. This is Aramaic. Right? Now you got the Syriac. The Syriac alphabet is a written system primarily used to write the Syriac language since the 1st century AD. So, the Syriac ain't nothing more than the Aramaic. It is one of the Shemitic abjads descending from the Aramaic alphabet through the Palmyrean alphabet and shares similarities with the Phoenician, Hebrew, Arabic, and Sogdian. The precursor and the direct ancestor, look at this, of the traditional Mongolian script. Look at that. Look what it said right there. It said the precursor, look at this. The precursor and a direct ancestor of the traditional Mongolian script. It's saying Syriac influenced the Mongolian script. Look at this. Look at the Mongolian script. That's the Mongolian script. Don't that look a little familiar? That looks Syriac. That looked like Aramaic with just a twist of the dialect, of course. Look what it says. Mongolian script. Traditional Mongolian script, also known as the Hudum Mongol, Benjing, Bashik, was the first written system created specifically for the Mongolian language. Look at that. First written system created specifically for the Mongolian language. So the Syriac, the Aramaic, has a direct influence to the Mongolian language. They go to script. They go to Mongolian script. See that, right? Mongolian is the principal language of the Mongolic language family that originated in Mongolia Plateau. It is spoken by the ethnic Mongols and other closely related Mongol people who are native to the modern Mongolia and surrounding parts of East and Northern Asia. Now look at that. They way over here. Look at Mongolia. But this shit was, influenced through the Syriac script way down here, which would have been the Aramaic. So Aramaic is far-reaching. They said Afghanistan, India, and now we found it in Mongolia. So that shows you how influential Aramaic was, and we ain't even know it. The Mongolian script has its root in the Syriac. See that? Look. The Syriac alphabet is a written system primarily used to write the Syriac language since the 1st century, right? It is one of the Semitic abjads, look what it says, descending from the Aramaic alphabet, right? So the Syriac descending from the Aramaic, and look what it says next. The precursor and direct ancestor of the traditional Mongolian script. Nigga, the Mongolian script connected to the Aramaic. There go the Mongolian script. A little different. Instead of going left and right, they're going up and down. And it says the traditional Mongolian script, also known as the Hudum Mongol, how you pronounce that, was the first writing system created specifically for the Mongolian people. Look at that. These the Mongolian people right here. Where they at? They go the Mongolians right there. They script is part and partial influence directly from the Aramaic. That's crazy. That's the Mongolian script. Don't that look familiar?
No.
He ain't tied up.
No.
This is the Mongolian script, family. Don't that look familiar? That's an evolved dialect of the Aramaic you're looking at right there. What did it say again up here? What did it say? What did it say? The precursor and a direct ancestor of the traditional Mongolian script. So the Syriac alphabet descends from the Aramaic alphabet, and then it says the precursor and a direct ancestor of the traditional Mongolian script. Mongolian script? Mongolian script? Babylonian Talmud? See that? It's the Babylonian Talmud, Mongolian script. See that? And the Mongolian script ain't too far from looking Arabic either. All this shit comes from the same family tree. But I'm showing you how, look how it got to Mongolia. Look how it got to India and Afghanistan based off what some of these scholars were saying. Take a break right quick, family. Give me your vortex in the chat if you're feeling the vibe, family. You know what I mean? Let's take a quick little break. You know what I mean? Let's vibe for a minute. When I split my thing. It's a blood clot vibe. Let me see them vortexes in the chat if you're getting this understanding, family, about how influential the Aramaic script and language really was.
Bittersweet Herbals, where the taste is bitter, but the results are sweet. Bittersweetherbals.com. Bittersweet Herbals, where the taste is bitter, but the results are sweet. Bittersweetherbals.com.
Yes, family, make sure to get your bitters. You know how we dizzle around these parts. You know what I mean? It's a blood clot vibes. Yes, family. So we basically touching on the Aramaic language and its influence. Touching how influential Aramaic is, you know what I mean? Now we're going to a little part of the Syriac version of the Bible. Now the Syriac will be the Aramaic version. You know what I mean? Now the Syriac translation of the New Testament was among the first and date from the 2nd century. The whole Bible was translated by the 5th century. And this is the Common Era too. So we talk about the Syriac script or the Syriac Bible, that shit don't even go back to the BC. Well, this is Common Era. And keep in mind, Aramaic was still flourishing around this time. Because the Jews were speaking in the 1st century. Yahshua spoke it, 1st century. Syria played an important or even predominant role in the beginning of Christianity. Here is where the Gospel of Matthew, the Gospel of Luke, how you pronounce that? Ignatiana, and the Gospel of Thomas are believed to have been written. Syria was the country in which the Greek language intersected with the Syriac. You know the Syriac is what? Aramaic, which was closely related to the Aramaic dialect used by Jesus and the apostles. Look at that. So we talking about Paul. Paul would have been speaking Aramaic. You know what I mean? James and Jesus would have been speaking Aramaic. The Nazarenes would have been speaking Aramaic. The Essayans would have been speaking Aramaic. Ain't that something? The Diatessaurian is the Syriac, 160 to 175 AD. Now look at that. Look at this. See that? This is the Syriac. It's a dialect of Aramaic. Ushamod. This is the earliest translation of the Gospels into Syriac. The earliest translation of any New Testament text from Greek seems to have been the Diatessaurian. See that? What did it say? The earliest translation, y'all chill out. The earliest translation of any New Testament text from Greek seemed to have been from the Diatessaurian. A harmony of 4 canonical gospels, perhaps with now lost 5th text, prepared about 170 AD by Athanasius in Rome. See that? We got a date of 170 AD. This is prepared. But look at that. So if the Greek followed this as their earliest translation, as far as from this, the Syriac of the New Testament, it would have been Aramaic influenced. Prepared by Athanasius in Rome. So now you have Rome being influenced by an Aramaic script, Syriac. Although no original text of the Diatessaurian survives, its foremost witness is a prose commentary on it by Ephraim the Syrian. He made a commentary on it. They go, Ephraim the Syrian. That don't look like no Bantu Negro from the Congo. You know what I'm saying? That don't look like no Bantu Negro from the Congo. That's doing a commentary on an Aramaic New Testament script. Ephraim the Assyrian, also known as Saint Ephraim, was a prominent Christian theologian and writer who was revered as one of the most notable hemographers of Eastern Christianity. He was born in Nisibis, served as a deacon, and later lived in Edessa. Interesting. The Diatessaurian Syriac, 160 to 175 AD, is the most prominent early gospel harmony. It was created in the Syriac language by Athanasian and Assyrian early Christian apologists. So this was created, this text, the Diatessaurian, this right here, was influenced by him. You have it. They go to Syriac. And he's behind that. What's that? Okay. Athanasius sought to combine all the textual materials he found in the 4 Gospels. What did he say? He sought to combine. So that means if he's combining, he's compiling. See that? He got his hand on Bible. See that? That Bantu Negro at the Congo, he ain't no Bantu Negro at the Congo compiling and combining New Testament Gospels. Athanasius sought to combine all the textual material he found in the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, into a single coherent narrative of Jesus' life and death. However, and in contradistinction to most later gospel harmonists, Athanasius appeared not to have been motivated by any aspiration to validate the 4 separate canonical gospel accounts, or to demonstrate that, as they stood, they could each be shown as being without inconsistencies or error. So again, these niggas playing with the text. He's playing with the Syriac text. The New Testament, the 4 Gospels in the Syriac, he compiling and playing with it. He fondling with the text. Athanasius 120 to 180 AD, was an Assyrian Christian writer and theologian of the 2nd century. Look, he's a writer during this time now. You know, everybody ain't smart and could write and read during this time, but he's a writer. So he has the ability to compile if he wants, right? The nation's most influential work is the what? Diatessaurion, a biblical paraphrase or harmony of the 4 Gospels that became the standard text of the 4 Gospels in the Syriac-speaking church until the 5th century. Syriac-speaking church would have been the Aramaic-speaking church. So again, look at that. After which it gave way to the 4 separate Gospels in the Peshitta version. Although widely used by the early Syriac Christians, the original text has not survived. It was reconstructed in 1881, look at that, by Theodore Zahn from translation and commentaries. See that? So they don't have the original text. So first you had this guy who gave it to you, who translated the Syriac, who translated the Gospels, or had made the Gospels into the Syriac script language. Then after that, it got destroyed. And however, this guy recompiles it in 1881. Ain't that the date, 1881, to say, yeah, Owaspi going, while the Owaspi is being compiled, this dude is reconstructing the Syriac New Testament. This guy, he don't look like no Bantu Negro from the Congo, but he's the one that's revising the Syriac New Testament, which in return would be the Aramaic. He doing that. That don't look like no Negro. When has a Negro had their hand on the Bible? When? We went back to the 4th century BC, coming from Ezra, coming on down the line to Common Era, now up to our time, and we still see all European influence on the text, whether if the text is in Hebrew, because if you want to talk about the Talmud, if you want to talk about the Jerusalem Talmud, all that's dealing with the European Jews, not no Bantu Negroes in the Congo. When we get to the Greek, we dealing with who? We dealing with Ptolemy II. He enforced the translation, authorship, compiling. And then when we come on down to now, we see, look, even in the Syriac, you have European influence. So I don't know what these cats is talking about. Tenacious harmony. Hush. Tenacious harmony followed the Gospels closely in terms of text, but in order to fit all the canonical material in, look, he created his own narratives sequence. See that? They creating their own shit, which is different from both the synoptic sequence and John's sequence, and occasionally creates intervening time periods that are found in none of the source accounts. This sequence is coherent and consistent within itself, but not necessarily consistent with that in all or any of the separate canonical gospels. See that? And Tenacious apparently applies the same principles in respect of the narrative itself, where the gospels differ from one another in respect of the details of an event or teaching. The Diatessaurion resolves such apparent contradictions by selecting one or another. Alternative wording and adding consistent details from the other gospels. See that? They're altering and adding, creating on their own accord, while omitting apparent duplicate matter, especially across the synoptic. So look at that, man. Most scholars agree that Tenacious did, from the beginning, include the longer ending of Mark 16, 9 through 20, and correspondingly is amongst the earliest witness to this inclusion. Tenacious added no significant wording to the textual material he took from separate gospels. Only 56 verses in the canonical gospels did not have counterpart in the Diatessaurian. Mostly the genealogies and what's that? Percopodoctory. How do we pronounce that? The final work is about 72% the length of the four Gospels put together, around a quarter of the text of the separate Gospels being adjudged by Tanation to be duplicated. McFall, 1994. So look at the influence. Look how they playing with the text. They fiddling with the text, right? And this is supposed to be the Syriac. In the early church, the Gospels at first circulated independently, with Matthew the most popular. The Diatessaurian is notable evidence for the authority already enjoyed by the Gospels by the mid to late 2nd century. Within 20 years after Tenacious Harmony was written, the Irenaeus was expressly arguing for the authoritative character of the four Gospels. See, look at that. Arguing over the authoritative. Y'all talking about, the Europeans that had no authorship over the Bible? Yeah, these niggas got all type of authority over the Bible. It is unclear whether Tanation intended the Diatessaura to supplement or replace the four separate Gospels, but both outcomes came to pass in different churches. The Diatessaurian became adopted as the standard lectionary text of the Gospels in some Syriac-speaking churches from the late 2nd to the 5th century Common Era, until it gave way to the four separate Gospels, such as the Syriac Sinaitic Gospels, or in the Peshitta version. At the same time, in the Church of the Latin West, the Diatessaurian circulated as supplement to the four Gospels, especially in the Latin translation. You have the Syriac Sinaiticus. Look at that. See the Syriac? Now we starting to look like a little bit of Arabic. See that? All this evolves from the from the Phoenician to the Aramaic to the modern Hebrew to the Arabic. All that is all one family, evolving through the times, evolving through the doors of history. That's Syriac Sinaiticus. The Syriac Sinaiticus is a late 4th century or 5th century manuscript of 179 folios containing nearly completely translations of the four canonical Gospels of the New Testament into Syriac. See that? Which have been overwritten by a biograph of female saints and martyrs with a date corresponding to 697 AD. Hey, look, it said female saints. And that's it right there. All right. We got to find out about them female saints. Which is this Palmsets. Palmsets is the oldest copy of the Gospels in Syriac. One of two surviving manuscripts. See that? This is one of the oldest copy of the Gospels in Syriac. And that should look Arabic. That should like Arabic. You can see how the Syriac could have evolved into Arabic, or did evolve. And the Syriac is a precursor of what? Aramaic. So it's one family tree just coming down the line. We got a picture right here. There go the Syriac right here below. Now you see how it's evolving? This is the Syriac, 12th to 5th century Common Era. Now it's starting to look like Arabic. And next you know, when Muhammad, now Arabic is on the scene. And Arabic is an offshoot of the Syriac, and Syriac is an offshoot of the Aramaic, and Aramaic is an offshoot of the Phoenician. Phoenician is an offshoot of the hieroglyphs. And that's the root of this whole shit. You know who that's supposed to be right there? Where it say? That's supposed to be, look at that, Syriac Bible of Paris, Moses before Pharaoh. So even in the Syriac Bible, you don't see no Bantu Negroes in the Congo. That's supposed to be Moses and Pharaoh. You dig? That's crazy. But this is Hazael. He's an Armenian king right here. The king of Aram, Damascus, king of Assyria. See that? El, God has seen. That's what his name means. Hazael, God has seen. Right? Look at his time period that he reigned. 8th century. 8th century. What is being influenced 8th century? Huh? That cuneiform. I mean that Aramaic. Armenians language, Aramaic. See that? Aramaic alphabet. These how the Armenians would have looked at. That's an Armenian right there. I don't know if he got a hat off. That's a lot. That's a lot of hair. In Syria, you know, it's a mixed nationality dealing with on that borderline. But yes, family, we just vibing out. You know how we dizzle around these parts. You know what I mean? Just showing and proving for the most part, you know what I mean, how influential the Aramaic language was and is, and how that language influenced even the Assyrians to give you what your modern day Hebrew is heavily influenced off the Aramaic language. See what I'm saying? That's why it's beautiful to have things on the timeline, because when you put on a timeline, you can see what, when, and where, when the influence began, because you know the influence, or the not necessarily the starting point, but what they attest the date to be for the Aramaic language is the 10th, 11th century, 11th, 10th century BC, and then coming on down, the Aramaic influence is seen coming on down to the 1st century. And you see it's being heavily influenced during the 6th century, the 5th century. You know what I mean? When Israel goes into captivity. Now, keep in mind, now that we understand this, now that we understand how influential Aramaic is, and we see that Aramaic was carved in stone from the 6th, 7th century in Syria. Now, Syria is where the northern kingdom was. So the northern kingdom would have been familiar with Aramaic. So when the Assyrians came in to capture and ransack the northern kingdom and bring them back into Babylon, the Babylonians now would have been familiar, or would have started getting familiar with the Aramaic. See that? They would have adopted, basically the Assyrians adopted the Aramaic script, and then in return made it their second most common speaking language. And then not only that, it became Assyrian Aramaic script known as the block script. They did a little bit of modification to the text themselves. So when the Assyrians got the alphabet or the script, they said, all right, well, we're going to, instead of doing the A like this, we're going to make it into like this. You know what I mean? They evolved it. They modified it. And that's what you got, the block script. When you got the modern Hebrew in block, each letter looks like it's formulated in a block script. So it shows you the evolvement, the evolution of the Aramaic. So by the time Ezra comes on the scene to return from captivity, going back to rebuild Jerusalem, they would have been speaking the Aramaic script. By the time you get to Yahshua, they say Yahshua, that was a common language during the day, Aramaic, during Yahshua's time. So it's showing you how influential the script was, even reaching as far as India and Mongolia, even influencing the Mongolian script. You dig? Where's that, Kian? My question is, the Bible connects John the Baptist and Joshua, but I have not read of John the Baptist in Owaspy. Did John the Baptist exist? Well, the Owaspy, it didn't mention a lot of certain characters that you may be familiar with in the Bible. Even with the story of Abraham, you have a little bit of Isaac, but the story of Jacob is not there. So I wouldn't necessarily push out that he didn't exist just because Owaspy didn't mention it or whatever. But you know what I mean? Like I say, some things were selected and chosen to be compiled in the scriptures, some things wasn't. But the Owaspy, I think, is more dealing with to show the angelical side, because the Owaspy is more heavily speaking of the angelical history more than the earthly history. You know what I mean? But because the one point in the Owaspy says you have the earth history. You know what I mean? I'm going to give you knowledge that you don't know of, which is the angelic history. So I wouldn't deny that. He more likely he existed, you know what I'm saying, if the narrative is true. You dig? Peace to Cosmon Cal in the building. I see you, big homie. Off topic, brother Sila. Cool shirt. Where can I get the shirt? You know what I mean? That's the homie Shane on Facebook. He be having the links. Hold on, let me see if I can put the link in the chat real quick. Let me run the rhythm on me. I look for you. The link them there. Let's run the rhythm. Is it some blood clot vibes? But you know what? With that Cosmon, I think how does the Aramaic? I think that, well, at that time, 5th century, now we're talking 15th century BC. Now keep in mind, the Aramaic, they came on the scene 10th, 11th century, way much later. But at that time of Moses, the dominant language would have been, of course, the hieroglyphic and the cuneiform. So the Aramaic, so the cuneiform. But you saw, it also said Moses was a master of many languages, although it don't go into detail of what languages. But if we was to go off the narrative, what were the dominant languages during the time of Moses? Of course, again, it would have been the hieroglyphics and it would have been the cuneiform. Because even in the Armenian letters, let's pull up the Armenian letters, which would have been a couple centuries after Moses, but nonetheless, it would have showed you the language the people would have been speaking. Let me see if I get this right. All right, there you go. No. Yeah. No. Yeah. All tight. Hold on. Push the wrong thing. Yes, family. The Armana letters. So when we look at the Armana letters, for example, right? The Armana letters, bomb. These are letters from Babylon to Egypt. And if you notice, let's go to the website. The Armana letters. And if you look at the script, the Armana letters, you see that cuneiform script right there. So the dominant languages during the time of Moses would have been the cuneiform, because that's coming out of Babylon. And then, of course, you got the hieroglyphs. It says the Armana letters, EA, is a tall clay tablet letter of 13 paragraphs in relatively pristine condition with some minor flaws on the clay, but a complete enough story that some include words can complete the story of the letter, entitled Love and Gold. The letter is about gold from Egypt, gold mine production, love between father king and sisters, and the current relation between the king of Matania, and the Pharaoh of Egypt, and the marriage of a woman from King Teshuvah of Mauritania. So look, right there, you see the region. You see Egypt down here. You see Mesopotamia up in this region. And they were sending letters back and forth. So the scribes would have been familiar with the languages because they would have had to read it before the Pharaoh. So the Aramaic letters is cuneiform, and as you know, you got the hieroglyphs on the other end coming from Egypt. So the Aramaic letters, about 300 numbered up to EA 382, are a mid-14th century BC, around 1386 BC, and 45 years later correspondence. The initial corpus of letters were found at Akhenaten's city of Akhenaten. So there we see the evidence of the cuneiform script, and now we have a time period of 1386. So this would have roughly been after Moses, and then we have a pharaoh Akhenaten. So Akhenaten would have been speaking the hieroglyphic, or whatever name they want to give it. So this is Akhenaten. Now we see the inscriptions on Akhenaten. Boom. You see the cartouches with the names in it. So this would have been the hieroglyph. So those would have been the two dominant language, the hieroglyph and the cuneiform. So the Aramaic would have had to have been the cuneiform. Them badass dogs. It's a blood clot vibes. Yes, family, run the rhythm. Yes, family, you don't know. You know how we do. But that's interesting just to show how influential Aramaic is. You know what I mean? That was a quick presentation, you know what I mean? Come back and follow up. But you got Assyrian. You got Assyrian Aramaic. They call it Surat. I'll show you Assyrian Aramaic. Look at the name. That should look similar to Surah too. It's a blood clot vibes. Assyrian Aramaic. Look, this is right here. It's called Surat, but this is Assyrian Aramaic right here. See that? Assyrian Neo-Aramaic. Chaldean Neo-Aramaic. Now, you remember when I read in Daniel? Let me go back to Daniel, show you how this all ties in, to show you how influential that language was, Aramaic. Daniel 1, going back to Daniel 1:4. It says, look, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldean. The learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. What does it say right here? Chaldean. What is Chaldean? New Aramaic. That's what Neo means, new. So Daniel would have been speaking Aramaic. The Suet. That's how it looks. Look at the land that it's native to. Iran, Iraq, Syria, Turkey. Syria is where it got it from. Look. Afro-Asiatic. That's where it's rooted in. Yeah. This is the Assyrian Aramaic. Suret, also known as Assyrian, refers to the very varieties of northeastern Neo-New Aramaic spoken by Christians. Look at that. Look at Luamung. Luamung would have had great influence of the Aramaic language. You know what I'm saying? If Paul is running around telling niggas he got a vision from Jesus, Jesus spoke Aramaic. But in return, Jesus is coming back to Paul speaking Greek, quoting Greek poem. Oh man, that's crazy. Spoken by Christians, namely Assyrians. The various northeastern New Aramaic dialect descended from Old Aramaic, the lingua franca, in the later phase of the Assyrian Empire, which slowly displaced the Eastern Shemitic Akkadian language. What's the Akkadian language? The cuneiform. I bet you it pulls up. See that? That's cuneiform script. That's just the older dialect of it. Beginning around what? The 10th century BC. They have been further heavily influenced by Classical Syriac. Classical Syriac, the Middle Aramaic dialect of Edessa. Some say that's where Abraham came from. Your boy Lucy brings that out. After its adoption as an official liturgical language of the Syriac Church. See that? Look at the Syriac Church. Look what they got in the middle of that. They got that. They got that Esau Jesus. But Surat is not a direct descendant of classical Syriac. So I'm just showing you how Assyria got an Aramaic dialect of its own, and that's how it look right there. See that? See that? This is an 11th century classical Syriac manuscript written in Serto script. Look at that. An 18th century gospel book from the Umayyad region of Iran. See that? See that? You got the Assyrian script, which is Aramaic, starting in Assyria, now extending to Iran. And this is 18th century. This is common era. Now look at the influence. Look at the influence. Look, Aramaic. It says Aramaic speaking area 1 AD. And that's right here. So this is the same region Yahshua would have been living in. They say 1 AD, common era. So this would have been the time Yahshua. Rome would have been well aware of Aramaic. And then it says, look next, Aramaic speaking area 1000 AD. 1000 AD is when what takes place? This is when your Talmud comes about. This is when your Jerusalem Talmud comes on the scene. This is when the Babylonian Talmud comes on the scene. And it would have been Aramaic. It would have been Assyrian Neo-Aramaic that would have influenced the Babylonian and Jerusalem Talmud. Now look, Aramaic speaking areas in 2010, now, right here, up in Turkey. They speaking that now. And look what it says. Mongol tribes that adopted Syriac Christianity, 600 to 1400, right here, common era. You remember, it says, look, Mongol tribes that adopted Syriac Christianity. I just read and showed you how it got there, how the influence came about. Pull that up again. Look at that. Right there. The Syriac alphabet. Right? Descended from the Aramaic alphabet. Right? And it says, look, the precursor and a direct ancestor of the traditional Mongolian script. Bag drop. Bag drop. So it's showing you that the Mongolian script is a direct influence from the Aramaic, which would have been the Assyrian Neo-Aramaic. That would have influenced the Mongolian script. And look, Mongolia way over here. So that just goes to show you, man. That just goes to show you right there that it's a blood clot vibes. That's what it goes to show you. It's a blood clot vibes. That's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy, Cal. Yo, Cal, yo, them last two lives was dope. That last one, the debunking the theory, the theory of relativity, the one you did, debunking the Big Bang Theory. Yeah, that shit was cold. That shit was cold. I checked that shit out a couple of days ago. Yes, family. Big up yourself, large up yourself, yeah. The Canaanite gods. So if you think about it, Luamung would have had great influence during that time, because Luamung jumped on the scene around the 7th century BC. That's when Luamung jumped on the scene, and he would have had heavy influence over the Aramaic-speaking people. He would have had heavy influence over them, and he would have had heavy influence over the Greek-speaking people and the Latin-speaking people. Those three languages and the English. That boy Luamung ain't playing no games, yo. But with that, family, I'm going to go ahead and sign out. You know what I mean? I just want to come drop this live about the Armenians and the Aramaic script, showing you how influential the script was from the 8th, 6th century BC coming on down to the 1st, and showing you how influential it became even to Mongolia. And that Mongolian script they talk about, that's recent too. You know what I mean? That's like 1800 type recent, 1600 type recent, like when they got that. So that's crazy. And with that, your boy Silah Shalom is out of here, family. You know what I mean? Y'all chop it up. Have a great day. We up out of here. Salute.